So I was born in the UK, left to go and live with my grandparents at the age of 3.
Right.
And so I used to write a lot because I couldn't speak to them, right? I couldn't tell them how I was feeling about stuff. And so I always used to write, but I didn't think anything of it. And coming back to the UK, I ended up being in a marriage that was abusive, and then I ended up locking myself away even more. So it's just really weird because I have a massive family, but I just felt I couldn't tell them what was happening. I felt ashamed, and I think many women that go through that, they know exactly what I mean. It's like you feel like you failed. As a wife, you have failed, right? Even though you're not at wrong, but that's just a feeling that you have. And so I had this feeling, and I was thinking to myself, what else could I do? And I just started to write.
Hey there, lucrative ladies. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so incredibly excited about today. Well, if you caught season 1 of the Lucrative Lady Talk Show, then I want to say a massive, massive thank you so much. We are so grateful to every single person who's watched all of the episodes and all of the support you've been giving us. It has been absolutely incredible. So thank you so much. We are, of course, shooting season 2. I have an incredible guest with me today who is a multi-award-winning speaker, best-selling author, and book creation mentor, who also has an incredible story that I want to share with you. So welcome to the show today, the amazing Michelle Watson, the author behind Authority. Hello, Michelle.
Hello, Pam. Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad to have you here. I mean, we've known each other for quite a few months online,
yes.
And it's our first time meeting in person. And, you know, how incredible to meet you in person and to actually hold this book in my hand. Thank you so much for joining me today. So I want to talk to you about all sorts of things. We have a lot of conversations to have today because I really want to just get it out there, how to really write a book quickly and how to write a book that sells. And I know that you are, you know, one of the queens that I know who does this exceptionally well. But before we get into the book writing process, let's just find out a little bit about who you are. So for the sake of the fact that, you know, we've only met each other in person, let us know, you know, who is Michelle Watson and how did you get to being that multi-award winning speaker and best-selling author that we know?
Wow, it's definitely been a journey. So I'm a mother, I'm a wife, 3 beautiful children. But apart from that, so my journey started back, I was writing. I grew up with my grandparents in Jamaica. So I was born in the UK, left to go and live with my grandparents at the age of 3.
Right.
And so I used to write a lot because I couldn't speak to them, right? I couldn't tell them how I was feeling about stuff. And so I always used to write, but I didn't think anything of it. And coming back to the UK, I ended up being in a marriage that was abusive, and then I ended up locking myself away even more. So it's just really weird because I have a massive family, but I just felt I couldn't tell them what was happening. I felt ashamed, and I think many women that go through that, they know exactly what I mean. It's like you feel like you failed. Right. As a wife, you have failed, right? Even though you're not at wrong, but that's just a feeling that you have. And so I had this feeling, and I was thinking to myself, what else could I do? And I just started to write. So I had a son at the time, he has special needs. So the journey, it was it was like a massive ordeal. It's like, I used to be scared to go home. I would ask for overtime in order just not to go home. Because it would be one thing or the other that I would be going home to. So if it wasn't to do with my son, it was to do with his dad, who was my husband at the time. And so I literally ended up becoming a woman that was just a shell. I was empty. I would cry myself to sleep. I would get up and I just can't wait for the day to start so I could go out and work. And then I ended up having a tumor. And that was it was just so dramatic. So did the scan, and it was a normal sized tumor. They felt it would be a safe operation to remove. And then one day I went out with my friends. He didn't want me to go out.
Your husband didn't
My husband, at the time, he didn't want me to go out. But I just wanted to go because I felt like I hadn't seen them for a long time. He didn't want me to have my friends, didn't want me to speak with my family.
Oh my God.
Unless he was there. So it was almost like monitoring tactic to make sure that I would only say what he would want me to say, right? And I went out. So this night, he went out first. He went out with his friends, and I thought, okay, my friends wanted to go for dinner. I would be able to go out for dinner and get back home before he found out. But he did. He found out.
Oh my God.
And he punched me right on the lump. By the time I got back to the hospital to have the pre-op scan, they said to me, this lump has doubled in size. And now the nerve was wrapped around the tumor. So they're saying to me, guess what? We're sorry, but we're going to have to do the operation to remove this lump. However, we're going to have to touch the nerve. So they then told me the left side of my face is going to be paralyzed. So can you imagine? I remember going into that operating room. I woke up, and the first thing I wanted to do was touch my face.
Yeah, of
but
course.
I couldn't because it was all bandaged, right? So then I had to go through that period of waiting for the bandages to come off, and then they came off. My face was fine. And then the surgeon says to me, well, it's okay, but it can happen in any period within the 12 months to follow. And believe me, it was scary. And so I used to write my feelings down because I couldn't share it with anyone. And I just remember getting up one day and saying to myself, you know, this is not me. I remember locking myself away in the toilet, actually crying and saying to myself, where am I? Where am I gone? Yeah. I feel like I was just living. And then I attempted suicide.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, Michelle. I mean, I just want to, this is just, I didn't know any of this at all. This is just crazy to me. So how long at that point were you married for at that point?
At that point, I was married for 5 years.
For 5 years. And during the course of the 5 years, was this, you know, the journey? Because when, you know, when it comes to domestic abuse, did that happen at the 50th, or was it something that was happening? Did you have signs?
It just, and that's the thing. Sometimes people say you must have had signs, but it was Jekyll and Hyde. He was like so loving. He's the type of person that would, if he's coming in from work, he would be buying you something, or I would go home and the table would be all set, and then he could switch from that so easily. It was like, it was scary to see. So the first time I thought maybe he was going through stress, maybe he's finding it, because at the time he was finding it difficult to find work. Right. And I thought maybe that's what it is. And then it went from, it was more verbal at the time. And then it slowly went from being verbal to being physical. And the thing is, you tend to say, you know what, it's not going to happen again. And he would normally say it's not going to happen again. Of
course.
Right? And he would be so tearful. Like, he could demolish everything, like the whole living room or the whole bedroom, and then he would cry afterwards and like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, and it's not going to happen again. And you want to believe that. Yeah. Especially for me, because I wanted it to work. That's how I want it.
You have children with him. There's all sorts of things at stake. The thing is, you know, listening to you, I know there are going to be so many women watching this who unfortunately are in a similar position. And one thing you've just pulled up is the fact that you wanted to believe him. And it seems like when men mess up, we sometimes as women, we want to justify it. We want to make excuses for, you know, their messing up. And as far as domestic violence, as far as beating you, why does that happen? Tell me from the perspective of someone who's been there. What is it that's going through women's minds to make so much excuses that you stay?
It's that nurturing side of you. It's that nurturing side of women that want to see the best in someone. So you will sit there and you'll tend to now start to evaluate, and you're looking back at the good times or the good things that have happened, and you're looking at, oh my God, but he's so lovely with this, or he's great, because as a dad he's phenomenal. Like, he's very, like, he would play with children all day, right? So, and then you start to say to yourself, do you really want to take that away from your children? Do you want to be the, you know, the villain in all of this, because you're the one that's going to initially take the children away? Yeah. And so at that point, I came to a point where it's like, maybe it's best if I am the one that removes myself from that picture, because you somehow manage to switch it back to you. Yeah. Maybe you did something wrong. Maybe you're not being a good wife. Maybe, and all of these things, it builds up. Yeah. And they say, you know what, fear is like being in a room where negatives are developed. And that's what your mind actually becomes. Yeah. You tell, and then people will say, well, how could you do that? Yeah. And know that you're going to leave your children? Yeah. You're selfish. Oh. But what they don't realize is that at that moment, you're actually thinking that you're doing something good. So in your eyes, you're not being selfish. Yeah. You're doing something good. You're making sure that your children don't have to deal with you, because to you, you're the problem. Yeah. Right? And so that's what tends to happen. There's no excuse around it, but for some reason you want to say, it's going to be all right. Yeah. Yeah? And so for that reason, you come up with the excuses to make it be all right. Right. until when you come to the point where you're going to say, well, guess what? It's either my life or his.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where I came to that point, because when I realized that I had attempted suicide, I went home and I literally cried, pulled the sheet off my head and I cried. And I'm like, that's when the realization hit me, like, how could I do this to my children?
Yeah.
Right? Who would be there when my daughter goes to prom? Or so it really, really affects you. It messes you up terribly. And that's how the journey kind of started. So I grew up in church.
Yeah.
But coming to the UK, I was like, oh God, it's freedom, right? So partying, going out with my friends, and it's like, leave that for now.
Right.
But I remember I had attended a church, and I went to my bed. I went to the church a few times because my friend did her christening there.
Right.
And so I would visit every now and then. And I remember going to my bed this night, and I woke up about 2 o'clock, my phone rang. And it was the pastor from the church, and I'm thinking, 2 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, that's strange.
2 o'clock in the morning. And I hadn't been there for a long time.
Yeah.
And so I went back to sleep because I thought maybe their phone went off by mistake.
Right.
Right? So ended up dropping the kids to school because I lost my job at that point. Bills were stacking up. So I would literally drop the kids to school, come back, and just pull a sheet over my head until I needed to pick them up.
Oh my gosh.
And that is exactly how I was. I had a sheet over my head. My phone rang again. This was like about 9:30, 10 o'clock. And it was them again, and I thought, well, maybe it wasn't a mistake, so I answered. And then the pastor's wife, because she's the one that we normally communicate with, she spoke to me. And then he came on the phone and he said, I could not sleep. He said, I kept seeing you lying in a coffin.
Oh my God.
And he said, you were alive, but you were lying on all of these dead bodies. What's going on? Literally that morning, and I just broke down and I started to tell them everything, and they invited me to church, and I went to church, and I just felt like there was this big building of weight that was on my shoulders that had been removed,
because you got to talk about it properly without him overshadowing you.
Exactly.
So one of the things you talked about earlier was the fact that you started to write. So I want to know, because this is just absolutely crazy how you go from being that woman, very unfortunate situation, absolutely terrible, to being this woman.
I know.
And not only that, but running a flourishing business, helping so many people to write their own books successfully and to sell. You know, what changed that? Where did that penny drop? And then we got to start actually turning, you know, all of that into something that became a flourishing business.
Yes. So now going to this church, and I remember there was a day the pastor was preaching about there's something in your hands.
Yeah.
And then he turned and he just used me as a reference, and he said, for instance, you, look at your story, look at what you've gone through. You could put that in a book. Somebody's waiting for that inspiration.
Wow.
And I sat there in the church thinking, yeah, right, me, who's going to listen to me? Attempted suicide, went through depression, who's going to listen to me, right?
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, your journey with your son, somebody would be interested in hearing that. A parent that is struggling with a child that has special needs would be interested in hearing that. And I thought, no. And by this time, I was now working. Yeah. And I remember being at work, and this lady entered. And she had a son. And, oh, my God, it was just really, really painful to see what was happening in front of me. And I went from the back office, and I went round, and I was speaking to the son. And he calmed down. And the mom walked up to me, and she started crying. And she's like, I've never seen that happen before.
Oh, wow.
And I was speaking to her, and she was like, you don't understand. So I started sharing my story with her, and she broke down, and she's like, are you serious? And I started telling her places where she could go and get help and stuff. Yeah. And then I thought, you know what, maybe the book is needed. Yeah. So I wrote my first book, Overcome and Rise Above, How to Turn the Downside of Your Challenges into the Upside of Renewing Your Life.
Nice.
And so that became inspiring, and people were saying to me, oh my God, this is so inspirational. Then people started asking me to come and share my story at women groups. Yeah. Then the school asked me to be one of the governors to help parents that are experiencing children with special needs and the difficulty between them and school life and everything. And then I went to Andy Harrington Speakers Academy just by chance. Yeah. Literally just by chance. I had about £120 in my bank at the time, and he was doing a massive deal. This is years ago now. I think about £60 to come to a 2-day workshop or something. Yeah. And I went. Yeah. And from there they were like, how long have you been doing this? How long have you been a professional speaker? And I'm like, professional speaker? Like, this is my first time coming to anything, even mentioning professional speaking. And they were like, are you serious? And I'm like, yep. And then I thought, nah, it's not for me. I remember when it was my time to speak, I went to the toilet and I prayed. I was like, God, I have no idea why I'm here. But whatever I'm going to say, at least make it make sense. So they don't look at me as a complete numpty. And I went, and I never forget, my husband came to pick me up, and he was standing in the passageway. And this guy that was in one of my groups that I spoke in, you know, running a flourishing business and everything. When he was passing, he stopped and he said to my husband, he says, "Is this your wife?" And he said, "Yes." And he's like, "She needs to do this."
Wow.
In the car going home, I said to my husband, "I don't know what it is, but I just feel like God is telling me that I need to go on this pathway." And then that's how it started. And then I was helping people to write books, just giving them information, not thinking anything of it, right? But I had the first book, but no money was coming in.
Of course.
I was going around speaking. You know how it goes when you're starting out, right? No money was coming in. And so I remember now joining the academy, you know, they said, well, why not let your pain become your passion, and you use that passion to make profit. And my passion was always writing. People used to come to me and say, fill out forms and write letters. I was doing this for free. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to challenge myself. But before this, the publisher that I worked with my first book, they had me helping them do webinars to coach their people because I did so well with the first one. Getting media attention and all of that. I was in the newspaper, on the TV, received a letter of commendation from Her Majesty the Queen. So they were like, she's good with this. So I was doing that, and then I thought, what if I could create something for people that could really, really get their story out there and get their clients coming to them, as opposed to them looking for clients, because that's where I was. And I said, you know what, I'm going to challenge myself. So my second book, I wrote it in 90 days, wrote it, published it, and got it out there in 90 days. And I challenged myself. I said, if I do that, then I will start the business.
Okay, right. Let's just understand this, because your big thing is writing a book that sells, right? So you wrote this book in 90 days, and we know that you've been helping so many people write their books successfully. How does one go from this is my story, or this is my passion, or this is what I want to write about, to not just write a book, but write a book that sells? You see? I don't want them to just write a book.
Exactly, you can't just write a book. Because what I realized is you could write a book and it's motivational. But it won't necessarily put money in your pocket. Because that's what I did with my first one. When I wrote my second one, at the time I was still I was doing my full-time job as a driver on the Victoria line. So I had stuff coming in my head and driving. I would get home, or once I get a break, I have a notebook and I'm writing down. But then I thought to myself, okay, great. Who is this really aiming for? Because do I want to motivate again, or do I actually want to create something that's going to bring money in? It's all good motivating, and I'm all about that, but that's not going to feed my children. That's not going to put a roof over my head. So it's about now paying attention to not just your story, but looking at elements of that story that could then make a difference to someone else. See, sometimes our experiences can be created into a product. Because somebody's going through, they're now walking the road that you once walked. But they don't know the steps. They don't know, okay, what block do I step on that's not going to sink, that's going to cost me more money down the line, right? So it's really pinpointing and getting down to the needs, desires, and pain points of the reader, right? What are the questions that's going through their head? So you want to make sure that you're not just writing, but you're writing targeting that particular market. So the question is, who is my target population?
Okay, so you begin with who the person is, what problems they've gone through, what you have gone through, right? And creating the steps, right? To get them from A
to B.
Essentially. And that is what your book is. You know, when you say it that way, it sounds so simple. So what is it? Why you've been working with so many people? Why is it that people struggle? You know, there are so many people who want to write a book. You know, there's a book in everybody. I've heard you say. You know, there's a book in you. So what is the biggest limiting belief that people have when it comes to writing a book that sells?
One of it being imposter syndrome.
Okay.
Because I think I don't know enough to even be talking about this or teaching this, right? And what they need to realize is that you just need to be one step ahead. So I know people say, oh, one step ahead, that's not enough. But hold on, the fact that you're one step ahead means you've taken a step that that person still hasn't taken. And they don't know how to take that step. So, and another thing that is really big for people is, I don't think that I can ever be an author. I don't have enough content in me to be able to put in that book. the thing is, questions triggers content. Most of the times when people say that I don't have content, even as a speaker, it's because you've not been asking yourself the right questions.
Right.
Because even when you're standing and you're speaking, if you should go blank, all you need to say, okay, great. What question or what one question would my audience ask me if I wasn't standing here on the platform?
Yeah.
Right? And that opens up a whole can of stuff, because then if it's, let's say you're talking about fear.
Yeah.
Right? You would then be saying to yourself, what questions do people have around fear?
That's right. Yeah.
It's mindset, it's procrastination, it's why they don't take the step. Then you start asking more. Why is that important?
Yeah.
Then you start to dig deep. Is there facts, statistics that you can release to open that topic up even more?
Yeah.
Right? Are there people that you can relate to?
Yeah.
That you can say, okay, this was one person that went through that, and now this is where they are.
Yeah.
Right? And you start breaking that lifestyle down.
Yeah.
So that is what it is. It's just really breaking it down into little snippets.
Yes, that's right. And taking it step by step.
Step by step.
And I love it. You know, speaking about imposter syndrome, I mean, Jesus, that's one of the biggest holdups when it comes to everything, not just writing a book, starting a business, in anything. Even people who are flourishing in their business experience. I've been through it myself. I'm sure you have as well. Right? Where you get to a certain stage and you start feeling like, you know, am I going to get found out? Am I a fraud? Am I really, up for doing this? Is this something that I'm supposed to be doing? So if there is one key thing that you could share, how does one break out of, that imposter syndrome and then go for what they want, be it to write a book, start their business, whatever the case may be, you want to get out of the imposter syndrome. What is your biggest tip for that?
I want to say something and it sounds so simple and people may be thinking, really? The main thing that's worked for me is about being real.
Okay.
Being and staying real to who you are.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, I say to myself, if by me being who I am, someone doesn't want to work with me, then they weren't the person that I should be working with in the first place.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? And that is so important to me. If there's anyone that knows me, they know that I don't try to be fake.
Yeah.
So before I had opened up and spoken about what went wrong with me, then I think I was really living in that imposter syndrome. Because a lot of my family didn't know, people didn't know. And then when I did my first talk and revealed like the really in-depth stuff of what went on in that abusive marriage, I had a lady that came up to me. Actually, she came up to me and I gave her a book for free. She went home and read, and she called me because my number was in the book. Yeah. And 15 years she's been in a marriage where she's been abused. And I was the first person that she's ever told.
Oh my gosh.
And she doesn't know me. I don't know her. That was my one time meeting her. And I literally cried. And I thought, imagine if I had remained silent.
Yeah.
So I realized that this was no longer a shame, but this was now a story that should really go out and change lives.
That's right.
Right? And that's how that started to fade away. Obviously, it still creeps up.
Yeah.
Right? Because I went from that stage to writing my first book and thinking, oh my God, and then going from that to then starting my business and it creeps up again. Do I know enough?
That's
you know, so in every stage, it will creep up.
It will.
But the main thing is be real to who you are.
Yeah.
Be real.
Absolutely.
Don't try to be. If you don't know something that your client asks you, it's better for you to say, you know what, I've never encountered this before.
Yeah.
I'm going to go and find out the information for you and give it to you. Instead of you trying to say stuff and then looking stupid.
Yeah, no, that's right.
So,
I really love that. And I would add to that park that part of yourself and just park it to the side. Yeah. Because it will always be there.
Definitely.
The higher you rise, the bigger that feeling, that feeling of the fear, the doubt, the am I good enough? Yeah. It will come. The more money you make, people think that money is everything. And the moment you start to make money, you start to feel confident. No, you need to feel confident and then the money will come.
Definitely.
And then you, again, it's the battle between the ears, isn't it? It's that thing in your mind. That's where the real battle is. When it comes to writing a book successfully and when it comes to starting a business and building it, the only battle we all really have to face is that one between our ears. So once you figure out, okay, my thing is imposter syndrome, or my thing is fear, my thing is doubt, okay, you acknowledge it like you have done, and you go, okay, brilliant, this is my thing, now I'm going to park it to the side and do it anyway.
Definitely.
Then, you will be successful when you are consistent, correct?
Definitely, that's it.
So I want to ask you, this is an incredible book. you know, and I'm really looking forward to actually taking action from it, because I will do and be reporting back. I want to ask you if there was something that you could share with our audience, you know, your 5 rules of success when it comes to writing a book that sells, right? So these are for people in business. They're not just doing it for motivation. What are your top 5 rules of success when it comes to that?
Okay, great. So the first one for me is this. You need to make sure that you're putting your expert positioning story in there.
Nice.
Definitely. Your expert positioning story, your audience, your people want to know who is it that they're working with? What's their morals? What's their values? But more importantly, what puts them in the position to talk to me about this? Right? Because it's all good for you to tell somebody, don't eat this or don't do that. But what gives you the right? Because people are going to ask that. How do you know about this? What journey have you been on, right? Do you have the experience of it? So that positioning story is very important, and a lot of people leave it out, right? With my clients, I always say to them, let that be one of the first things that you write about, right? The next thing is always remember the NDP.
Okay.
Needs, desires, and pain points of your clients.
Okay.
That is crucial, because at every time when writing your book and going through your marketing messages that you need to be trickle feeding in your book, it needs to be targeting that.
That's right.
When you're watching an advert, if you're working away on your laptop and you look up, that's because the advert either addressed the pain that you're going through, addressed the desire that you want to have. Right? So that is very important. The next thing is promote. So you want to make sure that you're the voice of your book, because many people, they're authors, but the books are in the household, right? Not doing anything with it, because they're thinking, oh, because I'm an author, it's going to all happen and fall into place. No, you also need to be the voice of your book.
That's right.
Branding, you know all about branding. That is very important. If you really want to make sure that your book is working for you, you need to make it be speaking your brand. Right? You can't just put any book out there. I see some books and I'm thinking, didn't they think about their brand before they put this book out there? So that is very, very important. Then I talk about the tail end.
Okay.
So now you have the book. What's going to be happening at the back? Because guess what? The book, selling a book for £10, it's not going to bring money in.
No.
Right? So you need to get used to the fact that, okay, sometimes you're going to give away a book, but what is it that you're going to get from that book?
That's right.
Yeah. So that is very important. What is it that you're going to let the book do for your business? So how are you going to then map the tail end out? What is it that you're going to sell on the back end of this book that will bring the money in?
And this is the key. This is the key that a lot of people don't do. I have so many people get on calls with me, Michelle, and one of the things they say is, Pam, I've written a book. And I'm like, congratulations. But it's sitting in my house, Pam. Okay. And this is the thing with a lot of people who write books. They don't do, they do some of the things, but promoting and figuring out, how do I turn this book into a business? When you look at the book, there isn't an offer in there. There isn't a way for, you know, for people to read it and take the next action. And so if there was one thing amongst the 5, I mean, all of these are gold, but that would definitely be the most important thing for me to really focus on, to really make sure that you make money. Because like you said, £10 a book is not going to, it's not for profit. Right, that is the biggest thing. You're not writing a book for profit with the book itself. It's the business that comes out of the book that is for profit. Michelle, thank you so much. It has been incredible having you. Where can my viewers find you?
So they can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn at Break Free Limited. And they can find me on Facebook. So the Author's Lounge is a good place for them to come. I share tips, strategies on how they can write their books.
Wonderful. We are going to link that in the description, guys. Listen, take a good look at this. I want you to go ahead and get this. You can get it on Amazon. Reach out to Michelle, stalk her, find her where she is, and find out specifically not only how to write your book, because I think that you can easily find those steps, but how to write a book that sells, how to write a book that brings you revenue, that where your book becomes a revenue source. This is the key to using your book to build a lucrative business. So make sure you check it out and make sure you grab the book, follow the steps, and of course reach out to Michelle so that you can find out exactly how to do what she calls the tail end, which is turning that book into a revenue source. It's been incredible having you watch us. Thank you so much. If you haven't already, please make sure you subscribe. Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Michelle. It's been amazing having you. Thank you so much, Lucrative Ladies. Thank you, Michelle. Have you enjoyed it?
Yes, I have.